The town felt normal. That was what bothered Thomas later. Everyone who survived the collapse had a different memory of the day before. Some remembered the strange weather. Some remembered the power flickering. Some remembered the animals disappearing. Thomas remembered how ordinary everything felt. He spent the afternoon fixing an old wooden fence behind his house. The sun was warm, the neighborhood was quiet, and for a few hours the world felt exactly the way it always had. Thomas liked quiet. He was the type of person who noticed things other sea people ignored. The loose tire on a stranger's car. The nervous look on someone's face. The way a person's voice changed when they were lying. His friends used to joke that he was always preparing for something that would never happen. Maybe they were right. Across town, Alex was having a very different afternoon. "You sold the display kayak?" his manager asked. Alex stood behind the counter, trying not to laugh. "Technically, yes. The one hanging from the ceiling? Also yes. You understand those aren't supposed to be sold?" Alex nodded. Looking back, that does seem obvious. His manager stared at him. "How do you survive?" Alex smiled. "Natural talent." Even when things went wrong, Alex somehow found a way to laugh. That was why people liked him. Thomas was the person you wanted beside you when everything fell apart. Alex was the person who convinced you everything isn't over yet. They were completely different. But somehow, they worked. That night, Thomas sat outside his house watching the sunset. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered. "Hello!" Static. Then a voice. Quiet, distorted. "Do not look at the sky tomorrow." Thomas frowned. "Who is this?" No answer. The call ended. He tried calling back. No signal. For a long moment, he stared at the phone. Something about the message bothered him. Not because it sounded scary, because it sounded like a warning. The next morning, the world ended. It didn't happen with explosions. There were no giant storms, no warning sirens, just silence. The power disappeared first, then communication, then everything else. People waited for answers. They never came. The news stations went dark. The internet vanished. The military stopped responding. Within hours, panic spread. Thomas watched from his window as the neighborhood changed from confused to desperate. People fought over supplies. Cars filled the streets. Everyone was looking for someone to tell them what was happening. Nobody knew. Then the sky changed. A dark wave moved across the clouds like something invisible was passing through them. And when it disappeared, the world was different. Thomas spent the first week surviving however he could. He learned quickly. Noise attracted danger. Cities were death traps. Trust was dangerous. The black crystal growths spreading across the world weren't just decoration. They changed things. People exposed too long became something else. And the creatures were later called the Hollow. They weren't dead. They weren't alive. They were something in between. They hunted by sound. They never stopped. Thomas lost people during those first months. Friends, strangers, people he tried to save. Eventually, he stopped letting people get close. Survival became easier alone, but easier didn't mean better. 540 days after the collapse, Thomas walked through the mountains alone. His backpack was worn, his jacket was torn, his face showed the exhaustion of someone who hadn't had a real home in over a year. He crossed an abandoned hydroelectric dam searching for supplies. Then he heard voices. He immediately grabbed his knife. People. That was dangerous. He moved silently until he saw them. A small group. 5 survivors, and one voice made him freeze. "Guys, I'm just saying, if we die here, I want everyone to know I was the funniest person in this group." Thomas stopped breathing. He knew that voice. The man turned around. Thomas whispered, "Alex." The entire group looked over. Alex froze. For a second, neither of them moved. Then Alex dropped his backpack. "No way," he ran forward. "Thomas!" They grabbed each other, laughing because neither of them could believe it. After a year and a half of thinking the other was gone, they were standing face to face. Alex stepped back and looked him over. "Dude," Thomas raised an eyebrow. "What?" You look awful. Thomas almost smiled. You look exactly the same. That's because I age beautifully. You haven't changed. Exactly. And for the first time in 540 days, Thomas wasn't alone. Alex introduced Thomas to the group he had been traveling with. This is Emma, Alex said. A woman in her late 20s nodded. She carried a medical bag that looked older than she was. Don't worry, Alex said. She only gets angry when people do stupid things. Emma looked at Thomas. So basically, she's angry all the time around you? Thomas looked at Alex. She's already figured you out. Alex placed a hand over his chest. After one sentence? That's impressive. The tall man standing beside her laughed. Marcus, he extended his hand. Former firefighter. Thomas shook it. Thomas. The younger girl holding a bow stepped forward. Lily! She didn't say much, but Thomas noticed how carefully she watched everything around her. Survivors who lasted this long learned not to waste energy. The last person stepped forward. Kevin. Alex smiled. He's the reason we're alive. Kevin looked proud. And I'm the reason we're usually in trouble. That too, Alex admitted. For the first time in years, Thomas found himself surrounded by people. It felt strange, almost uncomfortable. He had spent so long depending only on himself that trusting others felt like a weakness. But watching Alex laugh with the group reminded him of something he'd forgotten. Survival wasn't just about staying alive. It was about having a reason to keep going. They made camp beside the river that night. The fire was small. Smoke could attract hollow. Everyone sat quietly, except Alex. So, Alex said, looking at Thomas, 540 days alone? Thomas nodded. That's insane. It worked. Yeah, but that's the most Thomas thing I've ever heard. Thomas looked confused. What does that mean? It means you would rather fight 100 monsters than ask someone for help. Thomas didn't answer. Alex smiled. Still true. A distant sound interrupted them. Everyone froze. A scream echoed through the trees. Not human. Not anymore. Marcus slowly stood. Everyone ready? Thomas grabbed his weapon. The hollow came out of the darkness. 3 of them. Their bodies were covered in black crystal-like armor. Their movements were fast and unnatural. Their heads turned toward every sound. Alex whispered, I hate those things. Thomas looked at him. You've fought them before. Yes? And? Alex tightened his grip. I still hate them. The creatures charged. The group scattered. Thomas moved with precision. One creature lunged toward Lily. Thomas reached her just in time, pulling her away as the hollow crashed into the ground. Marcus swung his axe into its shoulder. It barely slowed down. That's not good? Thomas studied the creature. The older ones have more armor. Alex fired his weapon. Cool information. Maybe tell us the part where we survive. Thomas noticed the exposed area beneath its neck. There! Alex understood instantly. Even after all this time, they still worked together. Alex distracted the creature. Thomas moved behind it. One strike. The hollow collapsed. The forest became silent again. Everyone breathed heavily. Alex looked at Thomas. Still annoyingly good at planning. Thomas looked back. Still annoyingly bad at listening. Alex smiled. Good. You're still you. The next morning, the group continued toward a settlement called Haven. According to Alex, Haven was one of the last places trying to rebuild civilization. They had walls, food, medicine, people. Thomas wasn't convinced. Nothing survived this long without secrets. As they approached the valley where Haven was located, Thomas stopped. Alex noticed. What? Thomas stared ahead. Footprints. Fresh ones. Someone's been following us. Everyone became quiet. Marcus looked around. You sure? Thomas nodded. 6 people, maybe more. Alex looked nervous. Not scared, just alert. Friends? Thomas studied the tracks. No. A rifle shot exploded through the valley. Everyone dove for cover. A voice echoed from the trees. Drop your weapons! Thomas recognized the symbol painted on the nearby rocks. A black wolf. The Iron Wolves. A group known for taking supplies, controlling settlements, and leaving nothing behind. A man stepped into view wearing a dark armored jacket. He smiled. Well? He looked at Thomas. You survived longer than expected. Thomas narrowed his eyes. You know me? The man smiled wider. Not personally. He looked toward Alex. But we know both of you. Alex looked confused. Why? The stranger lifted a radio. A voice came through the speaker. A voice from a recording. Thomas froze. Because he recognized it. It was his own voice. A recording of himself. From before the collapse, the stranger lowered the radio. You're not just survivors. He smiled. You're part of something bigger. The Iron Wolves opened fire. The group ran. But Thomas couldn't stop thinking about one thing. How did they have a recording of him when he didn't remember ever making it? The bullets ripped through the trees. Branches exploded overhead as the group dove behind rocks and fallen logs. Move! Marcus shouted. Alex slid behind a tree beside Thomas. So, this reunion got exciting fast. Thomas peeked around the trunk. There are at least 8. Only 8? Alex grinned. I've had worse Mondays. Thomas rolled his eyes. You've never had a worse Monday. Fair point. The Iron Wolves slowly surrounded them. Their leader stepped into the clearing. He was tall, wearing black armor made from pieces of old military gear. A silver wolf skull was painted across his chest. My name is Kane, he said calmly. You've caused us quite a bit of trouble. Thomas frowned. We've never met. You don't remember. Kane smiled. But you will. Without another word, the wolves opened fire again. Thomas grabbed Lily and pulled her behind a boulder while Marcus and Kevin returned fire. Alex spotted 2 wolves trying to flank them. Thomas! I see them. Thomas sprinted across the clearing, using fallen trees for cover. One wolf rushed him with a knife. Thomas sidestepped, grabbed the attacker's arm, and slammed him into a rock before knocking him unconscious. The second wolf raised his rifle. Before he could shoot, thwip. An arrow buried itself in his shoulder. Lily lowered her bow. Nice shot, Alex yelled. I know, she shouted back. Emma laughed despite the chaos. For a brief moment, everyone forgot how dangerous the world had become. Then Kevin screamed. A hollow burst from the woods and tackled him to the ground. No! Emma yelled. Thomas reacted instantly. He sprinted toward Kevin while the creature clawed at him. Alex didn't hesitate. He jumped onto the hollow's back. You ugly son of... The creature slammed Alex into the dirt. Thomas reached them just in time. His knife found the gap beneath the hollow's neck. The creature let out a horrifying screech before collapsing. Alex lay on his back staring at the sky. You know. Thomas offered him a hand. I really miss normal Mondays. Thomas pulled him up. So do I. The Iron Wolves had disappeared. Kane was gone. Only silence remained. Marcus checked everyone for injuries. Kevin's arm was badly cut, but Emma managed to stop the bleeding. We can't stay here, Thomas said. They'll come back. Alex nodded. So where do we go? Thomas looked toward the mountains. Haven is too obvious. Marcus frowned. You know somewhere else? Thomas hesitated. I found something months ago. What? A bunker? Everyone looked at him. I never went inside. Alex smiled. Why? Thomas shrugged. I was alone. Alex laughed. So? If something went wrong, you would have died alone. Thomas nodded. Alex placed a hand on his shoulder. Good thing you're stuck with us now. For the first time in a long time, Thomas smiled without realizing it. 3 days later, they reached the bunker. It was hidden beneath an abandoned ranger station deep in the mountains. Most of the entrance was buried beneath dirt and vines. Marcus forced the rusted steel door open. A cold breeze rushed out. The lights inside suddenly flickered on. Everyone froze. "There shouldn't be power," Emma whispered. Alex slowly looked at Thomas. "You sure nobody lives here?" Thomas shook his head. "I've watched this place for months." They stepped inside. The bunker looked untouched. Computers, sleeping quarters, storage rooms, everything was covered in dust. Until Thomas noticed something. Fresh footprints. Someone had been here recently. A loud metallic clang echoed from somewhere below them. Lily gripped her bow. Did anyone else hear that? Another sound followed. Slow footsteps, getting closer. Alex whispered, "I officially hate bunkers." A voice echoed through the hallway. Calm, mechanical. Identity confirmed. Everyone froze. Thomas looked toward the darkness. "Who said that?" The lights brightened. A steel door at the end of the corridor slowly opened by itself. Inside stood a single man wearing a perfectly clean white lab coat. He hadn't aged a day. He smiled at Thomas and Alex as if he'd been expecting them. Then he spoke words that made everyone's blood run cold. Thomas and Alex sat in complete silence as the fire crackled between them. The forest had gone unnaturally quiet. No birds, no insects, nothing. Thomas slowly looked up. "Do you hear that?" Alex frowned. "Hear what?" "Exactly." The silence itself felt wrong. A second later, a branch snapped somewhere in the darkness. Then another. Crunch. 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 Something was moving, not wandering, walking straight toward them. Alex quietly picked up his axe while Thomas gripped the hunting knife tighter than ever before. The footsteps stopped just outside the light of the campfire. Neither of them breathed. A voice finally broke the silence. "Please." It was weak, human. "Help me." Thomas immediately stood. Alex grabbed his arm. "No." "But what if—" "No." Another voice echoed from the darkness. "Please." Then another. "Help." Then another. "We're hurt." Thomas's face drained of color. They're everywhere. The voices were coming from every direction now. Some sounded like children. Others sounded elderly. One even sounded exactly like Thomas's mother. "Tommy, please." His heart nearly stopped. Alex looked directly at him. "That's not your mom." Thomas knew it wasn't. She'd died years ago, but hearing her voice made every instinct scream at him to run toward it. Suddenly the voices stopped. Complete silence again. Then, a low growl. Dozens answered it. The infected burst from the tree line all at once. "There they are," Alex shouted. Thomas kicked the fire over as burning logs scattered across the clearing. Several infected stumbled into the flames while the rest charged around them. Alex buried his axe into the first attacker's skull. Thomas stabbed another through the eye before ripping the knife free. There were too many, far too many. "Run!" Alex yelled. The two sprinted into the woods as branches slapped across their faces. The infected chased them relentlessly. Thomas looked back. They're gaining. Alex spotted an old ranger tower sitting on top of a rocky hill. There. They climbed as fast as they could. The ladder shook violently as infected piled against its base. Thomas reached the top just as one grabbed his boot. Alex swung the axe downward, severing its fingers. The creature fell back into the crowd. Both men collapsed on the platform, breathing hard. Below them, hundreds, not dozens. Hundreds of infected circled the tower. Their growls echoed through the forest like thunder. Thomas stared over the edge. "How long do you think they'll stay?" Alex didn't answer. Instead, he slowly pointed toward the eastern horizon. Far beyond the trees, smoke. Not from a wildfire, Several thick black columns rising into the sky. Someone else was alive. Or someone had just started the biggest fire either of them had ever seen. Thomas looked at Alex. "What do we do?" Alex gripped the axe tighter. "We survived tonight." He paused. "Tomorrow, we find whoever made that smoke." Neither of them noticed the figure watching from another nearby tower. A man wearing military gear lowered a pair of binoculars. Into a radio, he whispered, "I found 2 more survivors. They're heading toward us. And they have no idea what they're walking into." The wolves had surrounded the abandoned quarry. Thomas, Alex, and the 7 survivors had nowhere left to run. Marcus checked the last magazine for his rifle. 30 rounds. Emily held her pistol. 6! Alex tightened his grip on his axe. "Let's make them count." The wolves attacked from every direction. Gunfire erupted. Thomas tackled one wolf to the ground, ripping the knife from his belt before the man could stab him. Alex swung his axe into another attacker's shoulder before kicking him backward over a ledge. The quarry echoed with screams and gunshots. Then the infected arrived. Drawn by the noise, hundreds poured into the battlefield. Chaos exploded. The wolves were suddenly fighting both survivors and infected. Thomas yelled, "Use them against each other!" The group retreated through narrow paths while the infected crashed into the wolves. Within minutes, the quarry became a slaughterhouse. When the smoke cleared, every wolf was dead. The infected slowly wandered away. The survivors had won. But victory came at a cost. Marcus had been bitten while covering everyone's escape. He hid it until they reached safety. Thomas noticed the blood running down his arm. "No." Marcus smiled sadly. "I wasn't going to slow you guys down." Emily broke down crying. Marcus looked at everyone one last time. "You kept your promise. You survived." Before anyone could stop him, Marcus walked into the forest alone. A single gunshot echoed several minutes later. No one spoke. Days passed. The group continued moving east. One afternoon, they crossed an old suspension bridge. Halfway across, cables snapped. The bridge lurched violently. Emily nearly fell into the river below. Thomas grabbed one arm. Alex grabbed the other. Together, they pulled her back onto the bridge just before another section collapsed into the rushing water. Everyone sprinted the rest of the way across. A week later, a massive thunderstorm rolled in. Lightning struck an abandoned gas station just as the group entered. The explosion sent fireballs into the night sky. Burning debris rained everywhere. Thomas tackled Gwen's backpack out of the way before a flaming beam crashed where they had been standing only seconds earlier. Alex laughed nervously. "I hate surviving." Thomas smirked. "Same." Weeks later, food was nearly gone. Hope was disappearing. Then, from the top of a hill, they saw it. A valley. Bright lights, guard towers, large walls, windmills, solar panels, gardens, children playing, smoke from cooking fires, an actual community. Nobody spoke. Emily whispered, "No way." Alex blinked several times. "It can't be." Thomas rubbed his eyes. This has to be a hallucination. As they slowly approached the gates, people walked around laughing. Families hugged. Dogs ran through the streets. Everything felt normal. Then Thomas froze, standing near one of the gardens. A woman with familiar brown hair. She turned. Thomas's heart stopped. "Mom?" The woman looked up. Marianne. She looked exactly the same. Standing beside her, Joe, James, and Gwen. Thomas stumbled backward. No, it isn't real." Alex grabbed his shoulder. "I see them too." Across the road, Sylvia was helping carry supplies. David was talking with another survivor. Sarah laughed as little Dean ran around chasing a dog. Madison picked Dean up into her arms. Alex's knees nearly gave out. "My family," He couldn't breathe. Thomas shook his head. "We've finally lost it. We're hallucinating." Neither of them could accept what they were seeing. After everything they'd survived, there was no way without saying another word. They turned around. Slowly, they began walking away. Thomas whispered, "It isn't real." Alex nodded. "If we keep walking, it'll disappear." Behind them, a familiar voice shouted across the road, "Thomas!" They kept walking. Then the voice yelled again, "Hey, Thomas!" Still, they didn't stop. Finally, James laughed and shouted the one sentence only the two brothers would ever understand. "You still owe me $50 from when you wrecked Dad's riding mower?" Thomas froze. His eyes filled with tears. Only James knew that story. Only James knew the exact amount. Slowly, Thomas turned around. James was standing there, grinning. "About time you looked at me, little brother." Thomas ran. James met him halfway. The two brothers crashed into each other in a hug as both broke down crying. Alex looked toward his own family. Sylvia covered her mouth. David smiled. Sarah burst into tears. Madison whispered, "Alex." Little Dean looked up. "Daddy?" Alex couldn't hold back anymore. He sprinted toward them as years of grief, fear, and hope disappeared in a single moment. For the first time since the world ended, neither Thomas nor Alex were fighting to survive. They were finally going home. Thomas hugged James so tightly, neither brother wanted to let go. "You idiot!" James laughed through tears. "I thought you were dead." "I thought you were dead too." Nearby, Marianne wrapped Thomas in a hug that reminded him of childhood. Joe smiled before pulling his son in. "I've been waiting a long time for this." Thomas couldn't stop crying. Across the camp, Alex dropped to his knees as Dean ran straight into his arms. "Daddy!" Alex scooped him up. "I missed you so much, buddy." Dean wrapped his little arms around Alex's neck. "I knew you'd come back." Madison hugged both of them before Sylvia and David joined in. Sarah wiped tears from her face. "Our family is finally together." For the first time since the outbreak, nobody was afraid. The encampment was called Haven Ridge. Nearly 600 survivors lived behind reinforced concrete walls. Watchtowers overlooked miles of forest. Solar panels powered the camp. They had clean water, doctors, schools, gardens, livestock, even a baseball field. Thomas couldn't believe civilization still existed. Joe explained everything. "About a month after everything started, the National Guard evacuated us. We thought you boys were already gone." James nodded. "They searched for weeks. We never stopped hoping." Alex looked at Madison. "How did you survive?" Madison smiled. "A convoy picked us up just hours before our neighborhood was overrun." Sylvia laughed. "Dean kept telling everyone his dad would find us." Dean grinned proudly. "I told you." Life slowly became normal again. Thomas helped build homes. Alex trained new guards. James taught teenagers how to repair vehicles. Every evening, everyone gathered for dinner together, something they hadn't done in years. One night, Thomas stood on the wall watching the sunset. Alex joined him. "You ever think we'd make it?" Thomas smiled. "Not once." The two laughed. Weeks passed peacefully, until one morning, the warning siren screamed. "Whoa!" Everyone froze. Guards rushed to the walls. Joe grabbed binoculars. "Oh no!" Thomas climbed the watchtower. His stomach dropped. Miles away, a massive horde. Not hundreds, not thousands. Tens of thousands of infected stretched across the valley like an endless river. Alex whispered, "I've never seen that many." The commander immediately ordered everyone into defensive positions. The gates were reinforced. Snipers climbed the towers. Families rushed into underground shelters. Dean looked scared. Alex knelt beside him. "Hey." Dean nodded slowly. "We're gonna be okay?" Alex smiled. We've beaten impossible odds before. Thomas looked across the wall. I hope you're right. That night, no one slept. The horde was getting closer. The ground itself vibrated from millions of footsteps. Then, something unexpected happened. The infected suddenly stopped. Every single one. They stood completely still. Thousands upon thousands of motionless bodies filled the valley. No growling, no movement, just silence. Thomas frowned. What are they doing? Nobody had an answer. Then, from the center of the horde, a single flare shot into the sky. It wasn't the infected. Someone else was out there. Someone had deliberately stopped the horde. Alex lowered his rifle. That's impossible. A figure emerged from the sea of walkers, calmly walking between them as if they weren't even there. The infected didn't attack. They simply moved aside, creating a path. The mysterious stranger looked up at Haven Ridge and smiled. Who is that? Thomas whispered. The stranger raised one hand in greeting, then disappeared back into the endless crowd of infected. The horde began moving again, straight toward Haven Ridge.
The walls of Haven Ridge shook, not from explosions, not from gunfire, from footsteps. Tens of thousands of infected marched toward the settlement like a tidal wave. Thomas stood on the western wall beside Alex. Neither of them spoke. After everything they had survived, the forests, the wolves, starvation, losing friends, believing their families were dead, this felt like the end. Joe climbed the tower. They'll reach us in 5 minutes. The commander grabbed the radio. Everyone to battle stations. Sirens echoed throughout Haven Ridge. Families disappeared into underground shelters. Children cried. The guards loaded every rifle. Alex looked down at Dean. You stay with your mom. Dean hugged him one last time. You come back? Alex smiled. I always do. Thomas hugged Mary Jane, Joe, Gwen, and James. If this goes bad, James interrupted him. It won't. Thomas laughed. You've always been stubborn. Runs in the family. The brothers embraced. The first infected slammed into the walls. Then another. Then thousands more. The entire wall trembled. Archers and riflemen opened fire. The valley exploded with gunfire. Bodies piled higher and higher. Flaming arrows ignited the front ranks. Explosives ripped massive holes through the horde. Still, they kept coming. They're climbing! Someone yelled. Dozens of infected began scaling piles of bodies. Thomas sprinted across the wall, kicking one backward before driving his knife into another. Alex's axe never stopped swinging. 1, 2, 5, 10. He lost count. War on the eastern wall. A loud crack echoed. Everyone looked. Part of the wall had begun collapsing. Fall back! The commander shouted. Concrete crumbled. Hundreds of infected poured through the opening. The battle became hand-to-hand. Thomas fought beside James. Joe covered them with a rifle. Alex protected Madison, Sylvia, Sarah, and Dean as civilians rushed toward the bunkers. For nearly an hour, no one gave an inch. No one gave an inch. Then, everything stopped. Every infected froze, exactly like before. Silence covered the battlefield. Thomas looked around. What now? A lone figure walked through the opening in the wall. The infected moved aside for him. He wore worn military clothing, gray hair, a long scar across one eye. No weapon. He calmly approached the defenders. Nobody fired. Something about him demanded attention. He stopped 50 feet away. My name is Elias. You've all been wondering why the infected obey me. Alex stepped forward. They don't obey anyone. Elias nodded. That's what everyone believes. He slowly pulled a small device from his pocket. It emitted a low-frequency pulse. The infected remained perfectly still. They don't think. They react. For years, I studied their behavior. I learned how to redirect them. Thomas stared. You led this horde here? Elias nodded. Yes, not to destroy Haven Ridge. To test it. James frowned. Test it? Elias looked around the settlement. Communities fall because people become comfortable. I've watched hundreds collapse. You fought. You protected one another. You never abandoned your families. You passed. Alex glared. Thousands died because of your test. Elias lowered his head. I know, and I'll carry that forever. He handed the strange device to Thomas. There are more hordes coming, much larger. You'll need this. Before anyone could ask another question, Elias turned. He walked back into the crowd. The infected followed him. Within minutes, the valley was empty, just like that. Weeks passed. Haven Ridge rebuilt stronger than ever. Concrete walls became taller. More watchtowers were added. Gardens expanded. New survivors arrived almost daily. Thomas and Gwen finally had the chance to live instead of merely survive. Alex spent every afternoon teaching Dean how to throw a baseball. James rebuilt old trucks with Joe. Mary Jane filled every Sunday with giant family dinners. Sylvia and Madison started the settlement's first school. Sarah became one of Haven Ridge's best medics. For the first time in years, people laughed more than they cried. One warm evening, Thomas and Alex climbed the same watchtower where they'd once hidden from hundreds of infected. The sunset painted the valley orange. Alex smiled. Remember that first night? Thomas laughed. I thought we were dead. You almost ran toward fake voices. You almost got us killed with that campfire. You almost fell off a bridge. You still owe me for saving you. Thomas grinned. I saved you just as many times. Maybe? They laughed until their sides hurt. For the first time, the laughter didn't hide fear. It was real. Months later, life returned in ways neither man ever imagined. Children played soccer inside the walls. Music drifted through the streets at night. People planted orchards. Someone even opened a little cafe where survivors gathered, every morning over fresh coffee. One afternoon, James found an old football. He tossed it toward Thomas. Come on, bet I can still beat you. Joe laughed. You couldn't beat him 20 years ago. Within minutes, nearly the entire settlement had gathered. Alex joined in with Dean on his shoulders. Madison cheered. Mary Jane laughed so hard she nearly cried. For one afternoon, the apocalypse disappeared. They were just families enjoying each other's company. Well, years passed. The infected became fewer. Nature slowly reclaimed the empty cities. More settlements connected with Haven Ridge. Roads reopened. Trade returned. Hope spread farther than fear ever had. One evening, now older with gray beginning to show in their hair, Thomas and Alex stood once more on Haven Ridge's western wall, the same place where they'd expected to die. Below them, children chased each other through the streets, never knowing what the world had once been. Dean, now a young man, walked past with a smile. You guys coming? Thomas looked at Alex. You know, we really were the last two standing. Alex smiled. Yeah, but we didn't stay that way. The two best friends walked back toward their families, toward laughter, toward home, toward a future they had fought for every single day. Behind them, the sun disappeared beyond the mountains as the lights of Haven Ridge flickered on, brighter than the darkness surrounding it. And for the first time since the world ended, the future looked brighter than the past. The end.